Magandang umaga po, magandang tanghali, magandang gabi, wherever you're located and whatever your time zone is. This is another edition of Crossfire after our absence for several Saturdays because of the loss of one of our beloved idols in our Katipunan ng Demokratikong Filipino, who actually founded the KDP and many other organizations thereafter. This is Rita Gadi, and in memoriam of this great man, I shall be reading the article of Mr. Michael Billington. This was published yesterday, and so this is very fresh as far as publication goes, and he summarizes not just the life of Sir Butch Valdes, but also the many things which has been part of our lives and part of the life of our country and the life of the world for that matter. So this is in memoriam. And the title of his article is Butch Valdes, Philippine Fighter for All of Mankind. Perhaps the best way to introduce these words honoring the life of Antonio Butch Valdes, who passed away in his home here in San Juan on December 30, 2022, is to quote his words at the passing of Lyndon LaRouche on February 12, 2019. So these are the words of Sir Butch Valdes. Today, the Philippine LaRouche Society joins millions around the world in mourning the loss of a truly great man. Lyndon LaRouche is God's gift to modern man, the most intelligent and morally courageous human being I have ever had the privilege of meeting in my entire life. As many great men in the past, the magnitude of his contribution to humanity, his true greatness, will be realized globally only after his death. Sharing his genius in teaching contemporary man how to think, how to discover truth, how to study history, how the future determines the present, that we human beings are immortal, having been created in his image and likeness, and how important it is to share all we know with our fellow men in a spirit of agape in Greek, so that each of us can discover the very reason why God has created us in the first place. Lyndon LaRouche may have left his physical existence, but he lives on through us as we share his ideas as our own, with the same unselfish intention of improving the quality of life of every human being on this planet. Rest in peace in God's eternal embrace. Those are the words of Sir Butch Valdes, and he carried on this legacy of Mr. LaRouche in many areas, in politics, science, philosophy, culture, and even more. Reviewing his life's work is a powerful lesson for all of us, that being a conveyor of truth, being God's strong right hand, as LaRouche often said, requires that we all master the profound ideas which unite the many disciplines that mankind is continually challenged to further master as we go on with our lives. Sir Butch Valdes came from a substantial family in the Philippines. His father, who headed an accounting firm in Manila, served as the Philippine ambassador to Japan and also to the Vatican. He first met the LaRouche movement while in Japan and encouraged Butch to contact as well, and also in 1980s, as he has often told the story of his father sending him a copy of the EIR, which is exactly where this is being published, Executive Intelligence Review. And so while they're in Japan, as we've said, that was where he first had the copy of the EIR with the cover story of the Philippines kissing girls next Iran. It was among the first of many articles in the United States prior to the bringing down of the government of Ferdinand Marcos Sr., an operation that served as a model to many color revolutions run subsequently by the United States and the British intelligence. In 2000, the year 2000, Sir Butch set up the Philippine LaRouche Society. And Michael Billington maintained a weekly correspondence with Sir Butch by phone and email. And Sir Butch from that time on and occasionally visited and met with a wide circle of associates in government and in the media, and with the early results of the youth movement within the society itself, engaging them in, well, singing classical music. Sir Butch is known widely across the Philippines from his weekly radio broadcast on Radio Mindanao broadcast nationally and internationally on the internet. In the past several years, he also presented 3 or more video programs. All of this actually not just locally, but also broadcast on Facebook and Instagram, and of course nationwide. And together with several others on behalf of several of those with the same intent, he organized and founded a political party in the year 2003. This was the Katipunan ng Demokratikong Pilipino, or what we call now as the KDP. This is the Union of Democratic Filipinos. Excuse me. And he co-hosted with his first son, Itos, who will be taking over shortly together with us here in Crossfire. So his broadcast analyzed both the domestic and the international events, always locating them within the context of the global financial and strategic situation, insisting that understanding local events requires viewing them from above, from the perspective and the context of the system failure that the global financial empire has been centered in London and the Wall Street, and whose oligarchic leaders actually have held most of the world economy in their grip. And this has been repeated several times in many occasions by Sir Butch. In addition to the KDP, Sir Butch created several national organizations to address the changing environment within our country itself, including Save the Nation, the Citizens National Guard, and during the presidency of Joseph Estrada in 1998 until 2001, he also served as Undersecretary of the Department of Education. His mission focus was always to free his country from the grip of power held by the international financial cartels, and to counter the power and the influence of the oligarchic families domestically, and as he insisted, especially that the nation's utilities must be released from the effective control wielded by the banking and related families in order to truly serve the people and develop the real economy. He captured his view of the United States in a report published here also in this EIR publication in October 2003 on the visit of President George Bush to Manila. And on this he wrote, it went clockwise, presumably due to the extensive security considerations, and the streets where his motorcade passed were devoid of people. So there you could see the reception actually that was undertaken here. So he contrasted this with a visit in 1960 by President Dwight Eisenhower, and Sir Butch also wrote about this and how warmly at the time President Eisenhower was received. Sir Butch was invited by the World Philosophical Forum to address an international conference. It was held in Manila in September 2019. He titled his address, Peace to the Advantage of the Other. It's a beautiful title, and I will repeat that. Peace to the Advantage of the Other. His address is reminiscent of speeches given by Lyndon LaRouche, who always addressed the financial and strategic crisis facing the whole world. But in the process, he gave lessons in history and in philosophy. The United States, as Sir Butch had said, many times, as he noted, has shifted 60% of its naval power to Southeast Asia. And that was where he situated his address in the current political and economic crisis, which is now confronting the world, noting that regime change wars in Syria, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and other countries, as well as the tensions in the South China Sea, and militarism, which was threatening global conflict, which could very well annihilate the present civilization. So we have here something like 30,000 or more nuclear warheads in the possession of the superpowers at 20 megatons each, ready to be unleashed in a war that could really destroy the entire population of the world 20 times over. So even as early as 2003 and thereabouts, and in 2019, when he addressed the World Philosophical Forum, he was already presenting the vision that could happen should these world powers come into conflict and another war would ensue, another third world war, as a matter of fact. So here we have how he located the crisis here in Southeast Asia in the longer span of history, pointing to the Peace of Westphalia of 1648. Can you imagine how long ago that was? But he repeats this because then that was a time when the warring parties finally came together after 30 years of religious war in Europe. And for the first time, a European community of sovereign states was established. And the only possible way of doing this was for each member of this European neighbors to recognize each other as having equal legal standing and guaranteed each other's independence. That is where the trace comes from actually, that there is peace in Westphalia precisely because of this 30-year war, and that they have come to take care of one another, take care of the other. That is exactly what Sir Butch has been emphasizing all throughout. So this was possible at the time because then you had the identity of this new alliance, which perhaps could be undertaken also with the problems we have here in the Asian region, with the conflicts of claims for several islets, rocks, islands, and waterways, and whatever it is that's being claimed by several countries here in our region, together with the interference of the United States of America that feels that the People's Republic of China is a threat as far as our region is concerned. So he has mentioned, Sir Butch has mentioned this Treaty of Westphalia as the possible way that we could arrive at some kind of a, not just a compromise, but at some kind of a solution to the conflict that is actually pervading now in our region. And Sir Butch also quoted several philosophical works of several books and so forth, so that he can be able to comment on this in association with the Peace of Westphalia. And so there you have it, that he is emphasizing that the agreements of the Peace of Westphalia included transforming the European river system from merely marking the borders between the countries, but into becoming economic corridors. That is very important. Not just neighbors in that particular riverway or waterway, but also as an economic corridor for the benefit of each of those countries. That could be done here, and he has emphasized this so many times. So he proposed a 5-point program to stop the threat of war here in Asia, including a non-aggression treaty between China and the 10 nations of Southeast Asia. That's the ASEAN, the 10 member countries of the Association of Southeast Asia Nations. So there could be some kind of a non-aggression treaty that Sir Butch was forwarding, so that commercial and military vessels using the Strait of Malacca construction in the Canal in Thailand would ease the congestion in the Strait of Malacca and the demilitarization of the South China Sea and banning nuclear weapons from the region. See, we don't exactly know where these nuclear weapons are located at this time because you have submarines, you have all of these aircraft carriers patrolling supposedly our region and the South China Sea highway. So this was also proposed early on by Sir Butch Valdes. He was also a champion of nuclear power. And well, we have to mention this because energy is one of the most important resources for the power and the generation of an economy, especially a country like the Philippines. So Sir Butch made himself the leading Filipino spokesman for restoring the country's nuclear program, which had been, well, it was laid to just lie there in 1986. Remember that the nuclear plant was started during the time of President Ferdinand Marcos Sr. And well, it was never made to function precisely because it was shelved by the administration that came after him. So that is where Sir Butch led the crusade to have this nuclear plant refurbished and opened as a, well, he had the primary intention actually of making this as the source of energy, which could reduce the expenses not just of the public, but also of industry, of the economy, and the industrial sector, which is so important and is so dependent on the source of energy. So because of this, when the International Atomic Energy Agency chose to hold a major conference in Manila, this was in September 2016. It was titled The Prospects for Nuclear Power in the Asia-Pacific Region. Sir Butch was invited to make a presentation. And he was introduced by Dr. Kenneth Pedicord, Director of the Nuclear Power Institute of Texas, and the Professor of Nuclear Engineering of Texas, of the A&M University. And in the introduction, he mentioned, and I quote this, "I am pleased to welcome to the podium a gentleman I sat next to yesterday and really enjoyed the conversations with him." That was how the introduction went. And so Sir Butch praised the IAEA for the work. And of course, he began all of this as far as the anti-nuclear hysteria was actually up in the air. He pointed to former President Dwight Eisenhower's Atoms for Peace program and quoted Eisenhower's address to the United Nations General Assembly at the time. This was way back in December 8, 1953, on the danger of nuclear war. And the purpose of the Atoms for Peace program was to make this fateful decision, which is the United States pledged before to devote the entire heart and mind to find a way by which the inventiveness of man itself, this atom, which is the nuclear, excuse me, could actually be part of our daily life as a source of energy. So Sir Butch proudly reported to the assembled nuclear scientists and the professionals that the Philippines became the first recipient of this particular Atoms for Peace program. And soon after, we were granted the resources and the technical help to put up a reactor there in Bataan. Just by way of a background, this was really intended to be able to serve our need for energy sources. And President Marcos early on had that vision. And so when it was shelved in 1986, and then finally they were thinking of reviving it and making it operative, it was Sir Butch who actually led that crusade. But then again, it's very sad that it did not push through. But then you have, of course, many things that intervened. And today, we are still hoping that with the new administration, we may be able to look forward to reviving this nuclear plant. And perhaps Sir Butch would be guiding us with his words, his thoughts, his ideas, and of course, the power that he had insofar as pushing this through at that time. Well, we also have to mention that Sir Butch was also very much involved in the economic order, and he was discussing this and discussed this continuously in many of his programs on radio, and of course many of the interviews he's had, and several other occasions where he talked about not just the economy of the Philippines, but the trending of the global economy, which has always said being controlled just by these two countries, America and England. And so sometime he already mentioned this in 1971, and this is Sir Butch saying that the economic order of the world has changed. I am relaying this so that we can best understand the genius of the man that we had we have lost him. He has now gone to our Lord, and perhaps they say always that his mission here on earth has been accomplished, but I believe there is much more that we have to do by way of the pathway, the highway that he has actually etched out for us to tread on. And so this is what he was saying about the world economic order, how it was that between 1946 and 1971, the whole world was being run by a certain economic order that came out of the Bretton Woods Agreement. And that Bretton Woods Agreement basically meant that there will be a fixed exchange rate, which means that there would be no fluctuation on currency changes, and it was fixed, and that it was the International Monetary Fund, or the IMF, that would be handling this currency or the fluctuation if it should happen. And the one that was supposed to be moderating this, really, as he said, was the IMF. And aside from that, of course, you had all of this usury that was considered to be a crime, but it was a crime during this particular period as it happened. People who were changing excessive interest rates were charged because of the anti-usury law. And so he mentioned this further by saying that it was the IMF that took the lead for the financial institutions to start imposing certain rules. And so he also elaborated on the fact that he remembers the time when the IMF was actually above all the different currencies of the world. And at the time, Ferdinand Marcos Sr. was the president. And then they told us that we needed to devalue our currency vis-a-vis the US dollar, and that they considered our currency to be overvalued. The peso at the time was more or less about 4 pesos to $1, and that we needed to divide immediately. I mean, we had to divide it immediately to 8 pesos. 8 pesos to $1, under the threat that we would not be granted the resources by the banking sector. So he was also trying to emphasize the fact that we were being dictated upon by the IMF. And so, as Sir Butch has said, we devalued, not exactly $1 to 8, but pretty close to 8. And subsequent devaluations that happened then. So there you could just imagine that we needed only 4 pesos to pay $1 debt, but in a short period of time, it was devalued, our peso was devalued. So that in 1986, it was 28 pesos for $1. So he was emphasizing the fact that these are the dictates of the IMF. And that is how even the World Bank has been part of this. And Sir Butch was really a crusader as far as this was concerned. And many other things that he was mentioning every time he was being interviewed, and in all the other fora and government associations and private organizations that where he was being invited, that was exactly what he was emphasizing, and how he said that because of what happened in 1986, when the Marcos government was taken over by another government, he called it the Scholar Revolution, actually. And so this was also done, sponsored and directed by the State Department and the intelligence community. I've spoken about this myself, insofar as how the American bureaucracy led by the Secretary of State of the United States of America at the time did the maneuvering of removing President Marcos from power at the time, 1985 to 1986. So here we have the rest of Southeast Asia. At the time when we already had our nuclear plant in Bataan, Southeast Asia did not yet have any nuclear. And so that is what they called a globalization program, which is supposed to convert the economies which were otherwise selling up to the what Sir Butch has meant the producer economies into service economies, making use of cheap labor. That was how they were trying to design our economy at the time. And that is why we stopped producing essentials and we were producing instead nurses, caregivers, culinary arts people, and other areas of service. So instead of becoming a producing economy, we became a service economy because of the powers beyond us that have been able to control the flow of financing. And Sir Butch has been one of those actually that tried to fight this out like a lone voice, like a Don Quixote against all those windmills and so forth. But then, of course, he mentioned that even with such difficulties, if only we had nuclear power, then we would be able to survive far better than as expected. So we know at the time that the only creature that has been able to use fire for its benefit and using fire for its was, well, as he said, this was from the beginning of time, from the development of man, and that was the whole history of mankind, and that is how our civilizations have been based. And so, as he said, we are Prometheus. We refer to this, of course, very often, like Prometheus, bound or unbound, the one who stole fire, actually, from the gods. And so that is why he was using this mythological sample as how difficult it has been all through these years up to this very day to be able to make nuclear power productive for the Philippines. Just an aside, when we had the construction of our nuclear power plant here, the Westinghouse was also constructing a nuclear power plant in South Korea. Well, today they have over 30 of that, and you could see the progress of South Korea. Whereas today we have a nuclear plant that is still waiting to be operated. It's already complete as far as all the facilities, equipment, and whatever other mechanical mechanical connections are needed. It just has to be restarted perhaps in a year. But that is, again, something that we are all waiting for. So here we have Sir Butch, and that is exactly why I am taking this time to speak of the many aspects of our lives which he has always been interested in, spoke about, and really moved forward to be able to convince government and people concerned to do something as far as the improvement of our country is concerned. For every human being, as he said, not just the general term of the people or the country in general, but each one of us. In fact, he went into other details regarding food and nutrition, so that we have to have a balanced diet. We have to know exactly how much of carbohydrates we need, how much of protein we need. And this has been part of the program that he has initiated, even with a measurement of the weight of children, of adults, to find out that we just do not eat and eat, or eat vegetables or eat meat, but that there has to be some kind of a calibration. And so he went into those details. I was mentioning early on, not just what was happening outside in the region of Southeast Asia, in the navigational highway of the South China Sea, but also now in the nuclear plant, and then eventually in the flow of the financial system of the world. And so Sir Bush was also some kind of a diplomat in a way, because as mentioned by Mr. Billington, Sir Bush assumed the role of a diplomat for his nation in place of the officially appointed diplomats who failed to deal appropriately with extremely important countries, especially China and Russia. He was interviewed regularly by a Chinese newspapers, a news agency, and he promoted China's Belt and Road Initiative, that One Belt, One Road initiative, which was launched in Davos over a decade ago, connecting the world with this inter-country railway system, state-of-the-art railway system, which was launched by President Xi Jinping in Davos. So there you have Sir Butch also very supportive of this. And he has repeatedly refuted the anti-China lobby against many of these concerns that the People's Republic of China had as far as that One Belt, One Road is concerned. In fact, we have been private interviews regarding this so that we are aware of the fact that he was one of the spokespersons, as Mr. Billington has said, some kind of a diplomat or a foreign relations propagandist, as far as realizing and appreciating what is being done, not just by the People's Republic of China, but the connectivity that it has presented for the whole world. Okay, so what do we have here in 2019? November 17, 2019, Sir Butch was interviewed by the Russian ambassador to the Philippines. And here we have had several of the exchanges on on several concerns, because he exchanged in a lively dialogue on terrorism, on drugs, on regime change, on energy, on nuclear power, on world peace, on space exploration, Ukraine, Syria, and the Russian-Philippines trade and cooperation. So there you have Sir Butch also being concerned with all of these issues, and was able to discuss this with the Russian ambassador quite extensively, and also with several of the concerns he had regarding, regarding George Soros and the all of this funding for drugs, which are also being questioned in many ways. And as the ambassador of Russia noted, Soros called the Russian President Putin as his enemy. And so there was this lively exchange of their ideas regarding the bad influence that this man had. This is Soros, as far as the world is concerned. And as far as nuclear power is concerned, Sir Butch was praising Razon, Ambassador Razon. Razon is the Russian nuclear agency. They came to inspect the dormant Bataan nuclear plant, and that was why they were saying that it will probably just need a year or so to be able to make it running. And if we can quote what was mentioned then, and this is a quote, "Only stupid people would call Russia a gas station," when it comes to talking about how important it is that nuclear power could be utilized as a source of energy. But then you have, as I've said, other sources, other powers actually outside of our country that do not want to have our progress go that way, and to keep us completely dependent on importation, on imports, and so forth. So Sir Butch is in the middle of all of this. He's spoken of it in global and domestic fora, and he has also discussed this with several international organizations, and as I've said, quite regularly in the radio programs and interviews that he has here domestically. And then, of course, if we have several of the associates of Sir Butch who will remember him, this is quite, well, with a heavy heart that we have to talk about it in a way. But many friends came, not many, but a lot of friends, associates came for the wake that he had, and together with members of his family. And there you have each of them speaking and talking of their association with Sir Butch, many of them recalling how it was that they first met and so forth. And so that is how important it is that we have to understand that there are those who actually let me pause for a while because I have to check what's been happening to my video. Okay, so am I okay now? We have Belle there at the studio trying to monitor us. I am having difficulty not just reading this, but also difficulty from my heart mentioning this, because this is a man that we dearly respected and honored. And as I've said, during the wake that we had for him, we had several of his associates and friends who came to not just to deliver eulogies, but to recall remembrances and memories that they've had with this great man. And I'd like to mention here, for instance, well, Ver Achivido, a very close collaborator with Sir Butch and his family. And this is what he has mentioned as part of his remembrances. So it was in 2003 when Sir Butch started his own daily radio show called Ang Ating Katipunan, to inform the public about the world financial collapse, to explain far and wide the economic ideas needed to uplift the quality of life of every single human being on the planet. He was so tired of hearing the so-called economists, economic managers who manage the economy by just raising or lowering interest rates, and then they loot the people by increasing taxes, privatizing government assets, imposing population control, etc. And so these policies could kill people. Economics for Sir Butch was about human lives. These are not merely statistics on a balance sheet. These are precious human souls. And economic policies must always be for the betterment of humankind. These are the words of Ver, his close association with Sir Butch. Sir Butch was a CPA and an MBA, former head of an accounting firm, former Undersecretary for Education at the Department of Education. And he would always say he wished he had known about LaRouche early on, or perhaps several years earlier, when he was still in his 20s, so that he could have done much more for the country. And so Ver remembers that the intellectual words that were exchanged between him weekly, as a matter of fact. He would participate with us in meeting out, in reading out loud in dialogue form and discussing Plato's works, which included the Republic, William Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, Gottfried Leibniz, Monadology, Moses Mendelssohn's Phaedron, and Johannes Kepler's Mysterium Cosmographicum, the harmony of the world and the new astronomy. So you can imagine the wealth of reading materials that were exchanged between Ver and Sir Butch. And that was how he would recall the man, and how he would reminisce about those times when all of these intellectual works were being discussed between the two of them. And he actually really liked unlearned ignorance by Nicolas of Cusa, and also his other works. He even asked me to make a few more hard copies of it, which he would give to his high school friends. And he would force them to join him in a dialogue. So that was when they were reading the report on Manchurians, on manufacturers, authored by the first Treasury Secretary of the United States, Alexander Hamilton, how he would be discussing our very own Dr. Salvador Araneta and his economic ideas influenced by the United States President FDR and Alexander Hamilton as well. And like a youth himself, Sir Butch would be joining several of their meetings and pedagogical studies of a constructive geometry, the anti-Euclidean geometry that, all of these Platonic solids, etc. And also many of these profound studies and profound thoughts were exchanged between Ver and Sir Butch. And I just have to mention this, just to make us realize the wide range of his ideas, his thoughts, his minds, his discussions. And all of this seemed ordinary on a day-to-day basis. See, here is, let's show a photograph of Ver there, seated with Sir Butch. And this is one of those programs that they had together. But on a day-to-day basis, those are the things that they were discussing. What a wonderful experience. What a wonderful man. What wonderful moments Ver must have had all that time together with Sir Butch and all the discussions. I was mentioning some books, some of those thoughts, some of those authors. Oh my goodness, all the way up to the fields of geometry, of astronomy, of astrology, and all of those years. And so that was how he would be remembered. And there was one time even that there was a Christmas message that Sir Butch posted on the KDP page, which was actually read and broadcast. And I just want to quote this. Over the years, it has gotten more and more difficult to look forward to the merriment and festivity atmosphere that Christmas time traditionally brings. We no longer can feel the goodwill thrown our way, and that how sincerely and all of this seems nearly perfunctory. No, I have not lost faith in our people. And yes, I have lost faith in our leaders. No, I am not bitter about the present conditions of life. Dire conditions made more and more manifest over the years. But yes, I am passionately angry at our government leaders who maliciously impose programs that are designed to promote poverty and depopulate our country. No, I am not angry at President Marcos Jr., but yes, I am still waiting for him to wake up and realize the gravity of the situation our nation and our people face in the near future. I have to read this now. He has departed from our midst, and perhaps these words will not be repeated again, but we have to mention it for the purpose of history, and also for those who may be able to relay this to Ferdinand Jr., because he is a great man whose ideas for the improvement of our country must continue to this day. Sir Butch Valdes, that is the man that we have lost over the past just a couple of weeks now, not even a month yet, or close to a month already. He was everything to me. That's exactly how Ver was saying. He was everything to me. He always insisted that I had to be responsible. This is from Itos. Itos, his eldest son, the first son, and his close collaborator, not just on radio, but in so many other video presentations. He is now the head of the family. And these are the words he mentioned then. And I quote, "He was everything to me. He always insisted that I had to be responsible for brothers and sisters. I was responsible for the family. I never understood. But I guess he was preparing me for this time. I will miss you so much, but I will see you soon. Not too soon. Father always had us sing. He taught us classical music, and we'd always have to sing at events. It's not how we sounded, which was not bad, but that we worked together to achieve a goal, to create beauty. So Itos ended his speech in the ceremony by bringing all the children and grandchildren, all 10 of them, in front of everybody to sing. The first piece was Mozart's glorious Ave Verum Corpus, and it was sung together with a video made several years earlier so that Anton, who had passed away, would also be with them at the time. And they closed with Alleluia Chorus from Handel's Messiah. That was a very, very touching closing for that particular wake. And several other people also wrote and spoke of him in the way they have met him and interchanged ideas with him. Many of them from the United States, from the LaRouche Society, from friends, from, well, his high school friends, his college friends, and several others. I myself spoke also during that wake. Perhaps you could just watch it on YouTube. You can just Google this. But there are many things we can say of the man, superlatives all. There were 1,000 things that he would still have been able to do had he lived a little longer. He did all the things that he has already done and established and organized. It is for us now to follow carefully, gently, and perhaps even as passionately as he did, all the footsteps that he has left for us to follow. It is very seldom that we can find a man like him. And you must pardon my using this whole hour of Crossfire dedicated to his memory. There will be other programs that we will be having in the future, together with our other partner, Paglinawan, and several guests that we will be inviting. And in every program that we will be presenting to you, you will understand why every once in a while we will not just quote him, but we will have him speak snippets of some of the words that he has spoken himself, because that will be far, far better than just quoting or reading. He has made so many friends with so many ideas that he has created. And perhaps in like manner, we may be able to see how important it is for us to care. Because the way and the manner by which he looked into each of the organizations that he has established was really to make the best of everyone, to be able to draw out from every person the capabilities and the qualities that could make him truly a great human being. He believed in the capacity of all of us to shine, as he himself has shown in his own manner. He has given advice to so many leaders. He has often spoken to many politicians. If only I could mention their names now, because then you would realize that they have not listened carefully or did not take into serious consideration the many things that he has told them. Every once in a while, people would call him, ask for his advice, and he would give it freely and tell them that this is what ought to be done. He had several crusades of which he was passionately involved in, and every time he had the chance to speak about it, he would. Sometimes, in many occasions, we would sit after a program and discuss other things. And most of the time, it all went back to each one of us realizing that so much will still have to be done. Are these lessons learned from him? No, it is not the learning. It is the internalizing. of his words, of his thoughts, of his ideas. They are all, I don't know how you would call this, astronomical, astrological way out of the box. What is a box? He does not want to be confined to the strictures of just what is basically an education that you have received. It is a learning on a day-to-day process. It is the observation of the things that are happening around us. It is the analyzing of why this world has become this way. And it is the understanding of the evil that still pervades in many of the hearts and souls of men that are in positions of power and are able to manipulate the lives of other people. That is where he stands, that we can be able to stand up and cry out the way he has done all his life, in every speech, in every occasion, in any time that he is able to talk about it. That is Sir Butch. I call him Sir Butch. In my mind, in my heart, in my soul, he is knighted, he is honored, and he is celebrated. The prayers we say that may his soul rest in peace. Well, Sir Butch, I really hope you would rest in happiness. And I know that wherever you are up there, you will be debating with Plato, with Socrates, with Archimedes, with all of the great philosophers and educators of civilizations that you have spilled out like everyday words, like they were just next door to us. How you would be quoting Shakespeare and Cicero and Demosthenes. How you would use the metaphors of this man who went out at 12 noon with a lamp looking for an honest man, and how, we have the image of the siege of Troy, and even the love affairs that we had mentioned in mythology and all of this. Many of this, it seemed to you as though they were just together with us at dinner or at merienda. The books that you have read, the stories that you have shared, the history, the anecdotes, the snippets of history that you could just, grasp from thin air and mention as though it was just yesterday that it happened, like the Westphalia Treaty that I was talking about earlier, and how you have emphasized this over and over, that it seemed as though it just happened a week ago, when that was in the 17th century, and we are now 2023, and we still can't solve, Sir Butch, the South China Sea Navigational Highway. Oh my goodness. And all your thoughts as far as the countries of the world is concerned, of how power is manipulated to use other people for the benefit of a few, how the cabals, as you would call it, this mafiosi, as perhaps we have a more vulgar term for it, that manufactures the flow of money so that they can control also the finances and the economies of the world. That was Sir Butch's words in many ways that he has spoken of them. And we will every day miss him, every minute that we have to talk about it. My partner, our partner, Paglinawan, I'm sure, would also be quoting him in many ways as far as our program goes. Crossfire, which is a title given to us by one of the finest broadcast journalists we have this side of the earth. Freddy Abando has talked about this even way back 4 years ago, and we finally came about to getting together, that's Ado Paglinawan, Sir Butch, and myself, to have the title Crossfire, which Freddy actually created for us to be on air, on YouTube, on the KDP channel for all of you. And I think you've watched several of them. Critics in a way, but most of the time going back to the vision of a man that we have respected and honored, and that was Ferdinand Marcos Sr., and the vision he had for our country, and the hope and the prayer that his junior would be able to pick up from what his father has already set and pursue likewise the same pathway, and perhaps improve on them insofar as making our nation and our people great again, as his father has mentioned. And so Crossfire was born, And for the past several months, we were enjoying the discussions that we had. And some people have commented that, are we being critical of what government is? No, we did not criticize. We created the ideas that are coming out of the words that we are expressing, which are actually ancient words, or as we could say, words of the past, where from we gather the jewels and the precious thoughts and ideas, the way we speak of Sir Butch today, all his precious ideas and all his words that can be able to guide us as we proceed. So this is Crossfire. I'm Rita Gadi, and this is the memoriam that we have offered to Sir Butch Valdes. Perhaps in the future, we will be mentioning him as often as necessary. So I'd like to look over now at some of those who have given their views to us. Can we open our chat box? Let's see. How does this go? Okay. So we have Manuhar Magallanes. Please discuss China-Philippines Unified Enterprise voice according to FL Makalat, etc. Hello, ma'am. Since I see you on the Katipunan channel, that was the time I idolized your advocacy to fight against the Marcos enemies and vote for Marcos as president. But what happened to BBM? He's still our president? Para hindi na siya pangulo natin. Oh my goodness, I will not read the rest of this. We will talk about this with Ado sometime in the future. Yes, Trekkers TV, I understand exactly where you're coming from. And then we have here, thank you, Ma'am Rita, Connie. Oh yes, of course. I know the Gomezes from way back, Connie, from St. Teresa's. You had other sisters too. I think one of them was even my classmate. Would it have been Elizabeth? Perhaps. But there were three of you, three pretty Gomez sisters in Santa Teresa. If that's you, Connie, then I will remember all of you at the time. So anyway, where am I coming from as far as this is concerned? Yes, there are many things that we can still talk about as far as Sir Butch is concerned. And I have here my PC, I have here my laptop. I cannot put together all of this. I even have my cell phone open, so I will not miss anything that Michael Billington has written. Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Billington, for that beautiful piece that was published yesterday on the EIR. It's a publication which everyone must subscribe to. Google it, and you have to read many of the articles that are there being printed and published. And so it goes that before we close our program, I'd like to thank Ver and Roxanne, and of course, Kathy, the inimitable tripod. I don't know how to call it, but the three of you actually are making all of this possible. And we will continue in the memory of Sir Butch Valdes, and we will follow as closely as we can the large, huge footsteps that he has imprinted on the pathway that we are going to thread now from here on. Thank you very much for having joined me. Thank you for those who have subscribed to the Rita Gadi Hour. I may be coming up with something similar to that, but on a shorter version of this. But Crossfire will continue, and we will be having guests that will also illuminate us, enlighten us, entertain us, and perhaps give us a good sense of humor and thoughts which are out of the box, the way Sir Butch Valdes has given us the idea and the ideal to be as closely possible as the genius that he is. Thank you for having joined me on Crossfire. This is Rita Gadi.